if indeed it was a crime. People die of natural causes, and that can happen as easily in the countryside as indoors. Or it might be a suicide, and for some reason those often do take place outside. All he knew for certain was that a woman's body had been found on the edge of the pine woods, close to a busy public footpath. 2 uniformed officers from Huntston had arrived, confirmed that this was no hoax call, it had come from a dog-walker, naturally, and then the matter had reached the duty desk at Kingslake Central. The track, by now more sand than gravel, took a turn to the left. Waters drove past the small cafe that sells ice creams and tea, plastic buckets and spades, little windmills and paper flags for sand castles, and then at the far end, where the track becomes a footpath, he could see the patrol car. A small elderly woman with 2 pedigree pugs on a single lead came towards him as he made his way along the footpath. It was narrow here, and he stood aside for her. She said crossly, "You can't get through. The police have closed it off." Waters said, "Yes, I know, They wouldn't say why. They should at least tell you why, especially if it's going to be all day like they just told me, and we don't know where else we're going to go for a walk, do we, girls?" He looked down at the dogs. One was breathing so heavily its own demise might soon need investigating, and the other stared up at him. It had crossed eyes, the first dog he'd ever seen with such an affliction. The woman said, "So you'll have to turn around. You can't get through." Having been sent back herself, she was plainly determined that no one else was going along the footpath. Waters said, "I'm actually with the police." She looked dubious, so then he had to take out his ID card, and she checked it. "Well, all right. Is it going to be closed all day?" "I couldn't say, not until I've been up and had a look for myself." "A look at what? What's happened?" "I'm afraid that I really can't discuss it, but—" "And do you get to decide? Are you in charge? You don't look old enough." There was no point in carrying this on. Waters gave her a vacuous smile and waited. The woman turned away, took 2 or 3 steps, and then turned again. She said, with more menace than one might have expected, "Just don't forget." "Forget what, madam?" "Who pays your wages?" He watched her go then, still muttering to herself, and the girls, and wondered how things might have gone differently if she had met his old boss on this footpath. He didn't recognize either of the uniformed officers who stood together on the footpath just a matter of yards before it entered the pine woods, but his ears were sharp enough to hear one say to the other, "Look up, the suits have arrived." It was true about the suit. He was wearing one. Nothing specific had been said, but Tirek always had a suit on, and since he had arrived most of the junior detectives had taken this as a hint. But there were times, like this one, when it felt out of place, 6:30 on a sunny morning out in the dunes and pine woods, and other times, too, when it was the wrong thing to be wearing, such as on the mean streets of Lake, when you wanted to get some sort of relationship going to gain some intelligence, but a pinstripe seemed to represent the very authority that the people who had the intelligence most despised. He'd heard the snide comments about Smith's shabby chic, but like most things concerning him, the longer you were in this job, the more sense it made. When he reached the officers, Waters introduced himself, held up his ID, and said, "I just met the old lady with the dogs. Have you sent many back that way?" The constables glanced at each other. The younger of the 2 was as tall as Waters himself, but much broader, a younger version of John Murray. The other was short, almost shaven-headed, in his 40s, and unsmiling. Eventually the older man said, "She's the first, but she won't be the last, not along here. You need to get on top of this, or they'll be taking shortcuts around, trampling over God knows what." Waters looked about him. From here he could not see the body, but the tall grass to his left had been recently trodden down. There seemed to be a new path into a patch of low